say. So.
Thank you, Joshua. Good to see everyone here for the lunchtime slot. I'm glad the food trucks are right outdoors, so you can bring that in and enjoy a meal as you watch us, or have something to look forward to when the talk's done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you guys today. It's a topic that's super passionate about. My manufacturing has just been something in my life growing up the entire time. And Chris Luecke and I, we're going to be having a really cool conversation today. We want to talk about the problems that we're seeing in the industry and ways that we see them being solved through automation, through technology, and really just how can we get the younger generation of millennials and Gen Zs passionate about the industry. So a little bit of background on myself. I've been in the industry for 10, 15 years, been in manufacturing, have an engineering degree in manufacturing, and really I've been able to help a lot of systems integrators and manufacturers automate with new technology.
I was actually going to introduce you.
Go.
So Jake, you need to be following Jake on LinkedIn, because every day he releases a how it's made style video showing different content of anything from an automotive plant to robotics to the latest in AI technology. So he is all over LinkedIn. Make sure you're following this individual there.
Absolutely. And then, of course, Chris Luecke with Manufacturing Happy Hour. If you like to open up a beer and listen to a good conversation, he has a bunch of industry influencers and leaders talking about the industry.
And for the record, there will be a couple opportunities throughout IME West to enjoy a beer with us and talk manufacturing in that fashion.
Absolutely. And we'll talk to you a little about that in a bit. So why are we here today? And I think it's a really important discussion. In the industry right now, we are going to be facing this massive labor shortage. What we call silver tsunami of this older generation is retiring. They're exiting the workforce. And not only is the labor exiting, it's all the knowledge that they've acquired for the last 10, 15, 20 years is leaving with them as well. So as we have all these jobs leaving and we have all these new jobs opening with natural growth, we're going to be seeing a massive deficit. Around 2.2 to 2.4 million jobs are going to be unfulfilled in the next 5 years in the manufacturing industry. It's this massive number, and we had a great keynote presentation earlier today talking about such a large matter. It's a matter of national security. If we can't produce product and manufacture product here in America, what's going to be happening to the future of our economic growth and also our security?
So those are the numbers. Let's talk a little bit about, let's say, manufacturing's branding issue, if you will. You're going to hear people talk about the 3Ds nonstop throughout this event, right? And there's a fourth D as well, which might be the most important one, which is there's a perception that manufacturing is dull. But let's start at the top, right? And I'm going to share a little bit of personal story of how I've seen this be the exact opposite throughout my career in manufacturing. So I mentioned, hey, there's a branding issue. People think that manufacturing is dirty and dark. Well, when I first started my career inside of an aluminum can making plant, that was the exact opposite. Bright, clean facility. In terms of dangerous, right? I'm gonna go back to that example. The first project I ever worked on was how do we make manufacturing safer? The reality is every time we come out with new technology, safety is in the forefront. So there's another area where we're getting rid of that misperception. But I think one of the most important ones to talk about in terms of, hey, how do we attract people so that we can make this 2.4 million job shortage number smaller, is how do we make manufacturing exciting, right? The reality is, and I saw this when I was living out in the Bay Area, there's a lot more overlap in the Venn diagram between manufacturing and tech now, right? Like 10 years ago, everyone was really excited to work at Facebook and Google, the Ubers of the world. A lot of that's still the case today, right? But the reality is, you look at these electric vehicle companies that have brought all this, let's say, move fast and break things tech mentality to the manufacturing world now. We're seeing things get more exciting in the manufacturing space through this shift of going from physical to digital, right? A lot of the tools we use in manufacturing now are on our smartphones or tablets that are out on the plant floor, or things that aren't even on the plant floor. You could be doing your job remotely because of all the technology that's available. So there's a lot of cool things going in manufacturing right now. You're gonna see them out there on the show floor all week. You just look around, there's a robot moving in every different direction. But what we need to do is make sure that story is being told in the way that allows companies to attract new workers, attract the next generation, and attract people to their businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things, I think when we all graduated from high school, we met with our guidance counselor and said, where do you want to go after you graduate from high school? Manufacturing was never one of those topics that were brought up to saying, oh, you're graduating, well, go get a 4-year degree, go into this, go into computer science, go into, services or information. It was never a topic around manufacturing. In fact, when you look at the statistics, 8 out of 10 parents in America believe that manufacturing is critical to the US economy and to our infrastructure. Yet when they ask, would you send your kid into manufacturing or would you encourage them to go in the industry? Only 3 out of 10 actually said, yeah, that's where I want my kids to belong. So there's this massive discrepancy between where we believe our priority should be, but they're saying our kids shouldn't be in that industry because of the myths that are out there. So when we look at manufacturing, what does the future employee look like? We know what our current generation looks like. Well, the average person in manufacturing right now is between 50 and 55 years old. They tend to come from one type of demographic, but they also come with a lot of old skill sets and how they learned. They weren't digitally grown in the way of what manufacturing is now. Manufacturing is moving from just this physical product to a digital process and a digital solution. So how can your future employees, a lot of times, what's their ability to be cross-trained? As manufacturing develops in a state where we're not just making the same product over and over and over again, we're seeing a lot of variability in components. How do they have the ability to learn and adapt to new manufacturing systems? What is their interest and aptitude in technology? I think as manufacturing moves to more of this digital state, do they have the ability to communicate and to work alongside a lot of this new technology? If it's the apps that Chris talked about, on your phone, if it's robotics, if it's a vision system, if it's some AI software that's beginning to develop a process for you automatically, does your future employee have those skill sets? Do they have the ability to communicate in a strong way? And I'm not just talking about communication with just verbal. Are they allowing to use new services and where we have Discord and Slack and Teams? I think when we all went to the pandemic phase, 2 years ago, no one was using a lot of these chat functions. On that, it was just, you have all these meetings, but now how many people use Teams or Google Meet or Slack as part of their daily conversation now? Do they have the ability to use those communication skills?
I never had my camera on once before the pandemic, and it was like a light flipped on March 17th, 2020. All of a sudden, that was the way business was done at that point.
Amazon was sold out for 5.5 weeks on webcams. You could not get a webcam for 5.5 weeks on Amazon at one point because everyone was buying them because no one used that type of technology before. And I think this idea as well is, can your future employee have attention to detail? Do they have the ability to look at something, understand, and act on it? And this is what we want our future employee to look like. I think these are all skill sets that we believe they need. Now, how are you going to empower your future employee to use these skills? And I think one of those things is, who are our future employees? Our future employees are millennials and Gen Zs. In fact, right now, when you look at the industry, the millennials are the largest working skill force right now in America and also globally. In fact, 37% of millennials currently make up our entire manufacturing workforce. Yet when you look at the manufacturing industry, millennials represent one of the smallest generations in the industry. So here we have this gap where millennials are the biggest working out there, yet they're the most underrepresented in the manufacturing space. So how do we see millennials and Gen Zs connecting to each other, but then more importantly, how do we engage and do that? And I think the one thing that millennials and Gen Z see differently is this idea of the need to find meaning in work. Gone are the days where an 8-to-5 job, you posted an hourly pay out there and they just showed up to work 40 hours a week and came home. If that's your strategy to attract your next workforce, you're not going to be getting those people. Those companies out there who are doing different ways to define purpose in their work is going to be what's attracting that workforce. Also, they view stuff beyond achievement. They view achievement orientation. or they're achievement oriented, where I'm not talking about they need a participation trophy. In fact, that's one of the biggest myths. The younger generations aren't the ones that need the participation trophy. It's the parents of those kids, which is that older generation that said, I want my kid to have that trophy. So don't say, oh, it's that Gen Z or that millennial who just needs to be congratulated all the time. It was the parents who put that in place. But I think one of those things is they want to be achievement oriented in a way where they feel that they're giving to something greater than just the daily job that they're doing. And I think when I look at some great companies out there that do a phenomenal job, or like SpaceX, which just happens to be 20 miles north of here, there is an achievement-oriented goal beyond just what their daily job is. It's they want to land on Mars. And everything that they do is to get to that larger goal. How are you as a manufacturer sharing what your goal is, and how are they, as your workers of younger generations, helping achieve that goal? And I think the other thing as well we got to remember is the younger generations are a highly educated generation. In fact, the millennials have a higher percentage of people with a 4-year or a 6-year or 2-year degree than any other generation before us right now. So they understand what it looks like to put in education and what it looks like to learn. So how can you then use these, I guess you could say, meanings that millennials and Gen Zs have to then further advance your workforce?
So maybe go back to that last slide really quickly, because I saw a lot of cameras. Does anyone still need a photo of this? We're going to keep it up for a few more seconds. I think everyone that needed a photo got a photo. The next slide's also good to photograph once we build it out. So let's jump ahead again. Jake just went over a lot of really important points about, the upcoming generations, Gen Z and millennials right now. Let's talk about what the actions are around this. So the first one is communicate purpose, right? Jake, you and I were interviewing a recruiter not too long ago on one of our shows, and they were saying a lot of the exact same things Jake was saying, right? It's no longer about just presenting, hey, this is the job description, this is how much it pays. It's about explicitly communicating the purpose that goes with it, whether it's something that's very, in the sky, pun intended, like SpaceX, as you said, or it's something along the lines of, hey, this is how what we do impacts sustainability, or this is how this actually results in results for our customers, or this is how it impacts your daily life when this product comes off the assembly line. So communicating that purpose. Second is adapting to their way of life, right? And I want to be very clear, this is a two-way street. What we mean by this is communication style. How do millennials and Gen Z communicate? Quick text messages, things along those lines. It's also as much on, Jake and I both fall into the millennial category as well, communicating with other generations the way they want to be communicated with as well, but making sure that message is getting transmitted the way that a millennial or a Gen Z will pick it up. I mean, for full context, I run a podcast, and the whole reason I started that was I moved from Houston, Texas to San Francisco, California, where I was calling on a much younger crowd of decision makers, and I needed digital content to reach them. So adapt to their way of communication.
And there's that digital content as well that I think is extremely important. When you look at younger generations, when we have a problem out there and we want to learn how to fix that problem, I was talking with a couple of people in the audience before, if we have like an error pop up on a PLC or a robot, what do? We immediately go to YouTube. We don't open up a manual anymore to try and find what the error looks like. It's a different process in how we're solving problems. I remember when my dad first taught me how to change calipers in a car, you would open up an AutoZone booklet and you would go to the back, look at the appendix, look at calipers, go to page 47, follow those pictures that were black and white that had some 10-word description on how to change a caliper. Where now I can go onto YouTube, type in the exact car that I have and say, how do I do this? And here's this video instruction teaching you how to address this problem. How are manufacturers enabling their workforce to be able to address issues on the fly and make decisions through digital solutions and content? If you're still on your manufacturing floor and you're setting up work instructions or a job or a change order, and your process is pulling a 3-ring binder off of a shelf that who knows how old, that who knows Bob, who was the maintenance guy there 40 years ago, that made your notes in there saying, well, actually, make sure you actually hook the red wire up to this pin instead of this pin, and they have a Sharpie up there crossed off 3 and number 4. Is that your current process? And is that going to attract your next workforce to say, wow, this hasn't been updated in 40 years. They're not investing in new technology. Why are they going to invest in me if they're not even going to do the means of that? You know, what are you using on your phone now to enable your workforce to learn those instructions?
The last one we've got up here is investing in their future. And what we mean by that is thinking beyond the existing job there is today. We've talked about the workforce shortage a lot today. The reality is, you know, when you come into a manufacturing job, let's say you're starting off as a controls engineer, a technician. Jake and I both come from the automation world, right? You want to have it set up such that let's say this next generation, millennial and Gen Zs, know that there's ways to move through their career beyond the job that currently exists today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about technology on the next slide in the roadmap. Jake, anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, you know, I look at this. The average adult in America that's graduating from colleges graduates with $35,000 in student debt. Going to a college 4 years, $35,000. If you as a profession or you as a company were going out there and saying, we're going to invest in your future exiting high school, and we're going to help develop a curriculum for you and build the skill sets where you don't even need to go to a 4-year college to gain the skills. How attractive is that as a company to say you don't need to put yourself in financial risk where now you can't buy a house until you're 42 years old because you're still paying off student debt? What are those opportunities that you're giving? You're impacting them beyond just that typical weekly or bi-weekly paycheck that you're paying them. Saying we are impacting the future of your own personal career, and that's how you're investing in the future. And then maybe they've already gone to college. What are you doing to continue to invest in their skills? We had a slide earlier talking about what the ideal workforce or what the ideal skills are going to be. Are you training your future workers to the skills that you're going to need 5 years from now? If your whole goal is to automate with new automation, robotics, and vision systems, are you currently training your employees that are working for you right now with those skills? Are you investing in their future so they have more skills, they have more knowledge, and at the same time, you're as a company, you're reducing your risk by adding automation?
Now, Jake and I have been talking at you a lot so far. We're about to show you some really cool technology coming up, but I want to define some terms first. And one thing Jake and I are both equally passionate about is getting past a lot of buzzwords and getting into what they really mean for manufacturing, right? So, I mean, quick show of hands. Everyone here's heard of Industry 4.0, right? Or a good, solid group. So Industry 4.0, let's go over a quick timeline of where this term comes from and why it's so important to manufacturing right now. So when you hear Industry 4.0, we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. First industrial revolution was the first industrial revolution, right? Steam powered. Second industrial revolution being the introduction of the assembly line and electrical power. Third industrial revolution, that's when we start to automate, right? That's the onset of robotics, PLCs. And the fourth industrial revolution, which is where we are today, is the smart factory. Like you have autonomous systems, you're leveraging different networks, Wi-Fi to communicate, so that way you can do things. It's not only within the four walls of the facility, but you can be connected to your facility outside of that.
And more importantly, it's how do you connect the manufacturing, the automation to the people? That's one of those biggest things that we're still facing is when we have all this data and all this analytics out there of our machines running, how is that then achievable and actable by your workforce? Preventative maintenance and condition monitoring, we look at all this stuff out here. I think this is a great summary, if you guys want to take a photo of this, of like the 9 main solutions of what Industry 4.0 is. Everything from autonomous robots to simulation, systems integration, this idea of IoT, right? We're now able to connect a motor and look at the temperature and the vibration that's running on a conveyor system and bring that right up to our cloud. So then I, on my phone right now, could look at several machines that are all spread throughout the US and know, is that machine running right now? What's the temperature of that? Oh, when's that likely going to fail if I see a peak in vibration or temperature over time? It's the idea of accessing more information and additive manufacturing, cloud computing, but these are all different solutions that are out there that are enabling and empowering manufacturers on this new technology, not only to make them more competitive, but also to attract a future workforce, right? Additive manufacturing is this awesome topic. I have multiple 3D printers at my house. In fact, last year, there were over 26 million 3D printers sold in the US to homes. That's how massive of an industry that this is. So if we as a manufacturer can say, hey, here's all these younger generations that are excited about new technology, what are you using to then take that excitement and bring it to your workforce? So here's some cool videos, unless Chris, you want to
Tech time. No. I was going to say, we've been talking a lot. It's time for the technology. So we got a couple demos that you're going to get to see as we go through this to really illustrate everything that we've just talked about.
So here's this first video. This is called projected augmented reality, where before we used to wear a lot of glasses, and that's what you thought it was. Well, here is light being projected down on top of a work surface that guides an operator through a manual task, a manual inspection, a manual assembly. But not only is this guiding the process, it's also teaching a worker how to be trained through this process. So imagine you constantly have 40 or 50 or 60 different products that you're running. Imagine that you just simply set up a program and you tell the operator, okay, this is how you're going to manually assemble this process, or this is how you're going to be inspecting this process. Allowing this worker to be working alongside the system is really important. On top of that, it allows you to have gamification. If you can have a worker interacting directly with technology, you can keep track of how long did it take that operator or that worker to inspect that part or to assemble that part. Then once you get that mean average, you can know how long did it take the 5 other workers on that line doing the exact same thing to do that. Who's the high person? Who's the low person? You'd be able to get more information on how to improve your manufacturing process.
Now let's talk about lifestyle. That's something we didn't talk about earlier. That's a high priority for millennials and Gen Z, right? And if you don't have the energy to go snowboarding or hiking on the weekend, that's going to impact someone's interest in working for you. That's why things like exoskeletons and scanners that you can have on your wrist, let's say wearables in general, have become so important in manufacturing, right? It's about making sure that these jobs aren't dangerous anymore. This isn't something that's going to wear on you over time. You're going to have tools that allow you to do your job in a safe, ergonomic fashion as well. Or things like grip assist gloves, which are going to come up next. I've used these before, they're pretty cool. It's a glove that actually allows you, let's say you have a job where you're picking and placing all day, right? You actually have grip assist gloves where you're able to grab a piece of equipment, it assists you with that grip, and then you can move it without using that same amount of energy, right? You see it right here, and I know I've overused this throughout the presentation, but I pull out my phone a lot because a lot of these things are connected to the phone. You can adjust the level of grip that it provides as you leverage a solution like this. So you can say, hey, I need more grip for a heavier object, or I need less for this, right in an app like that. So again, going back to adapting to the way of life that millennials and Gen Z are used to. We grew up with our phones, right? Like, this is a tool that allows us to say, hey, I can do my manufacturing job the same way that I jump onto Instagram in the middle of the day.
I think it's one of those things too, when you look at manufacturing, a lot of processes of manufacturing are still going to be manual processes that have to have workers and operators doing those. But how can you enable that job to be easier on that worker? And that's the benefit of what we're looking at. If you're having such a retention problem in the workforce where people are not staying because that job is just putting tremendous, either it's boring or if it's one of those things that it's deteriorating their body, they're not going to want to stay. Well, if you can leverage automation to do things like that, that's really cool. Another great solution. Right now, there's currently 550,000 welders in the United States. Any guesses on what the average age of a welder is? Anyone? 55. Well, there you go. That's the exact number. So the average age of a welder in the United States right now is 55 years old. So imagine in 10 years, you're going to be losing over half of your workforce to retiring who's a skilled welder. So how can solutions like this, in this case we're looking at a autonomous or a collaborative robot that allows you to set points, and those points that are automatically determine where the weld positions and weld seams are going to be on a robot, right? So we can take a worker who might not be fully skilled in welding, but they know I need to weld these points here. I can then set up a system to say I need to weld point 1 to point 2, point 3 to point 4, point 4 to point 5, and then the robotic system will automatically handle those runnings for you. And this might not be huge for large applications where you're doing tens of thousands of parts over and over again. You're going to be using a standard, probably industrial robotic system that's already out there. But what if you only had 50 parts to do? Well, here's an opportunity for you to run a lower value, higher SKU variation of parts if you're a manufacturer in the metal industry.
All right, now this one is cool because we've all been getting a lot of packages delivered to our house more so than ever over the past 2 years, right? With the onset of AI and machine learning, machines can now differentiate between different packages. So they can sort packages, whether it's a flat envelope, a larger package, and get that sent in the right direction. So this is a robot doing that type of application. But I think the important thing I'm going to point out here actually has nothing to do with the robot, right? You see people running around these applications. Another misperception is that robots are taking our jobs, right? And the reality is that is so far from the truth when we can't even fill all the open jobs that are opening up right now. What robots really do is it creates higher level work for the people that were once doing those pick and place jobs, right? Kind of evolving on what I was saying before. You're not going to be picking and placing that part forever. Eventually, you're going to be the individual that's trying to figure out, hey, how can we automate this further? What are the things that we can do to make these robots more collaborative? What's the right application for automation? What's not the right application for automation? So there's a huge human element that plays into this as well.
And this is a really unique application. This is at the Memphis facility, at their FedEx location at their Memphis facility. And this is a job that normally happens between 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. every day, where they have what they call these poly pack bags or envelope, where they have, I think, 2 to 3 million of them. And they were having a really hard time wanting people to come in at 2 a.m. to come at work to literally take a package, isolate it, and throw it on a scanner.
Shocking.
Yeah, who would want to come in at 2 a.m. and do this? So it was one of those things is FedEx realized they need to automate and use a solution. And what's really cool about this is we see a lot of robotics in the industry. Robots have been around for decades. But what's really cool here is these robots are now collaborating and working alongside what we call deep learning or AI. So now we have the ability to pick parts that are randomly oriented, that come in random packages. A lot of times they like to call it an egg in a bag, where that weight can be moved and differentiated anywhere in that product. So how does a solution be dynamic enough to allow you to adapt to that to pick it? That's where we're seeing a lot of advancements in robotics and technology, is robots can now make these decisions automatically without the need for an operator. And as Chris said, we have these workers out there. They're actually called crew chiefs. And this is a system that allows it where if that system doesn't know what to pick next, they send a notification on an app to a worker and saying, hey, we're at work, we're at cell number 4 right now. What's that next package we should pick? Option 1, option 2, option 3. And then that human can finally give that last opportunity to say, this is the robot you need to, this is the package you need to pick, now continue that process.
I'm gonna go off script here as well. The other thing that's cool about the people behind these processes, we see this not only at FedEx, but other companies as well. We've got a number of friends over there, but it's the people that have been in there that were on the shipping docks to start their career, right? These are people that have moved up the ranks at FedEx that are now in charge of these type of applications. So if you're looking for proof that, hey, these things are job creators rather than job takers, it's a perfect example of where the people that now are the brains behind these processes are the people that have seen it going for years and decades.
This is another really cool one as well. This is a software called Mimic. So you can see the operator is really holding a teach pendant. And then the robot on the other side is mimicking that worker's movements. So before, the only way to teach a robot was to pick up a controller and use this language that was 30 years old and do that. Well, now we have the opportunity for a robot to say, an operator to say, hey, robot, follow my path. Either if it's painting, it's sanding, if it's doing an assembly process. And they can teach the robot to do these step-by-step operations in a very simplified way. And that's how technology is enabling these new workers who a lot of times have the same skill sets that are needed, but then now they're allowing technology to leverage and multiply their skills. So a really cool solution. This is called Mimic. I think what we talk about is we talked about a bunch of solutions, but what's next? Chris and I, we're both big proponents on developing the workforce locally. So our question for you is if you're a manufacturer, a lot of times you're not going to be drawing your talent from 100, 500, or 1,000 miles away. You're going to be pulling your talent locally. So what are you doing to engage locally with your talent? Either it's at the high school, if it's at the community college, if it's at the trade schools. Your future employees are local, so you need to be investing locally before they even start working for your company or start the interviewing process. First Robotics is this massive program out there that has millions of students involved with that are getting kids excited about science, technology, engineering, and math. If you're a manufacturer, what are you doing to get that program started at that local high school? Or if that exists, what are you doing to have your engineers invest in these kids' futures, right? Because if that kid grows up, and in fact, I'm a example of this. I ended up working for the companies that were sponsors for me when I was in high school. So there's a company called JR Automation. They're a big machine builder out there. They were a sponsor of my first robotics team when I was in 9th grade. I ended up working for them when I graduated and had that ability because they impacted my future career. And if they're impacting you at that age, they're going to be continuing to impact you down the road. And I think some other things as well is, does your company and content match your attraction? Does your 8 to 5 excite and ignite their future? One of the questions that I always ask is, I always like to do the bathroom check. If you walk out onto your manufacturing floor and you walk into that bathroom on that floor, what does that say about your company? I think that's the biggest thing, right? If you walk into a Tesla or a SpaceX manufacturing floor, or you walk into then a different manufacturing and you look at the bathroom, what does that say about your current thought process of how you treat your employees? What are you doing to push your career forward, as we talked about earlier? What are you doing to advance just besides their 8 to 5 task, that they're going to then have that 8 to 5 job at your place 5 years from now? Is their job something that they would share? I think it's the biggest thing, right? When we're sitting down and we're having friends, or we're having a discussion with our family, and they say, "Hey, what did you do today?" Is this something that you want to talk about? They say, "You know what? I worked on a bunch of robots, and we're doing this really cool assembly process using a vision system and automation." Or is it one of those things where, well, I just sat at a workbench all day and put parts together? Mm-hmm. What's more exciting to your employees? And then how are you using automation to empower their future? I think it's the other big thing, and one of the takeaways that I want to do. Automation is not designed to replace people, it's designed to enable people. How are you enabling your workforce with automation?
Now we're going to get into this topic in a bit more depth tomorrow. We've given you a general overview of, hey, what's possible in manufacturing? What are the things that will attract the next generation? But the real thing we need to talk about too is, what are the things you need to do to really get started on that journey to know, hey, what technology do I implement first? How do I prioritize the challenges, and where can automation, robotics be a solution to that? We're going to talk about this more in depth tomorrow at an Industry 5.0 workshop with our friend Conrad over here. And if you want to connect with us, we're going to have some time for Q&A, I believe, a little bit of time for Q&A here at the end. Jake and I will also be around here all day today and tomorrow. We'll see you at the happy hours, the booth crawls. We're open to having these conversations all the time, right? We love doing this. That's why we come up on stage and try to make this conversational. So we're excited to hear what you have to share as well.
Well, what we want you to do right now is take out your cell phone, do that digital enablement, take a picture of these barcodes. The one on the left is mine, the one on the right is Chris. Connect with us on LinkedIn. This is where you can reach us. This is the way that we're able to share a lot more information and what we consider the new technology that's out there. So take a picture of that, find us on LinkedIn, reach out to us. Our email's down below, or you can also visit us at mfgchamps.com. All right, well, that's the presentation. We really appreciate it. I think we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. Any questions at all that you guys have that Chris and I can answer?
I think we have a third mic as well, or you can just speak really loudly. Oh, Joshua in the back has a mic for anyone with questions. No questions?
No questions at all. Oh, we got one over here, okay?
Can you elaborate on the question you had about the bathrooms? I mean, I didn't quite follow what you were saying. What was?
Oh, let me try it. Let me try maybe. Okay, so when I think about it, it's like I think it showcases the type of culture you have there, right? Is the bathroom a mess? Is it clean? Like it's I've heard it used before, right? And ironically, I've seen it go awry when you have a bunch of contractors on site for a maintenance day before it might not be reflected. But aside from that example, right? It's looking at those little things that say, hey, how much do employees care about this place of work, right? I would say the break room, kitchen, same simple type of test, right? Jake, did I interpret that right?
No, that's a great summary.
Gotcha. Automation, all of the technology. If the bathroom's a mess, the automation and the systems are a mess.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things, it's a culture example. How are you willing to invest in your employees? You know, I've been on factory floors that literally the doors are ripped off the stalls. You know, and if they're not, if a manufacturer is not willing to make even the bathroom a comfortable place for a worker to do the business, you know, what are they going to be doing on the floor? You know, in the sense where if you're not investing in that manner, how are you investing in their future with technology and empowerment and purpose in their future?
Back to those 3 and 4 Ds, it can certainly be a sign if the place is going to be dirty or dangerous, if you see that there. Good question.
Any other ones? All right, well, we appreciate your time. We're going to be out here afterwards if there's any other questions or comments that you want to have. And then we hope you can join us tomorrow. We also have a live podcast that we're going to be doing today and at 3 p.m. at booth 3997 with Fanuc North America.
Yep, newsroom booth out on the show floor. And hey, have a great rest of the time here. Show's just getting started. So thank you for spending a little bit of your time.
Thank you,
We
everyone.
really appreciate it.